Welcome back to a special Why Blank and Blank Lost as we squeeze in this discussion between the quick back-to-back nights of evictions and the upcoming finale. I'm David Bloomberg, and I don't think I've ever been so happy to lose my winner pick, along with a person who really wasn't contributing much to the game. Joining me to talk about all of that is my co-host, Ovi Kabir.
David, what a busy weekend we have. I think it's funny because I never thought we would be rejoicing as much to lose a winner pick for yours. But I know week in and week out, you've been regretting this choice from the beginning. But I will say, we thought it was they got a lot more miles than we thought they would get.
Yes, both of our winner picks have, and yours
Mhm.
still has a chance to win the game. We'll have to see. We'll talk about that in our spoiler-free predictions. But, she's still there, so there's still a chance. Now, normally Big Brother has its fourth place eviction on Thursday and then the finale on Sunday. So we just talk about all of the final four at once. But with them also having a fifth place eviction Wednesday, we felt it would be a bit much to talk about five different Big Brother players in one podcast. So we decided to split it up. And even just having two here as a double podcast, it's a bit longer than usual. So imagine what five would have been, especially including Keanu, because there's so much to talk about with him. I think what we'll have to say about him is, maybe a tiny bit more than we'll have to say about Ava. But as with our podcast about Kelly and Lauren, we unfortunately have to drop out a few of the examples we otherwise would have used for Keanu because there were just so many of them. And little preview, they weren't positive examples. But we'll still get the point across, I'm sure.
I'm excited. I enjoyed the character of Keanu, and I am interested to see where you and I might disagree on certain rules with him. But I do remember in our pre-game, our session when we look at each player. I always say there's always a player that is the antithesis of David's rules. Some player that breaks the rules and finds a way to go on and on. And this year, I feel like it was your winner pick, Keanu. But I think there's going to be some interesting discussion about Ava. Regardless, I'm excited to jump in with both of them.
Yes. Of course, we did not know just how much comps. I mean, we know comps play a huge role.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know how big a role they would play this season when we made those predictions. Now,
true.
even with two very different players to discuss, we will follow our usual path of comparing how they both played to a set of guiding rules I originally wrote way back in 2004 and have modified ever since. We'll analyze their actions using what we saw on TV, live feeds, interviews, and other information. And of course, the most recent published version for anyone who'd like to peruse them is at robhasawebsite.com/bigbrotherrules. Now, this is the part where I say, and we always have some other things to discuss about the week. Well, not this time. It's more of a usually thing because I don't feel like there's anything else of major importance to talk about today. Most of the week was the build-up to Keanu going and then the quick turnaround for Ava. So, I mean, we could go over the whole Vince and Morgan, Vince, woe is me, what am I going to do, etc. stuff again. But I really don't want to. If you want to see my opinions on that, check out my TikToks and YouTube videos where I just have little 1 minute blips about them, 1 to 2. But I mean, if you really want to talk about that, Ovi, we will.
I think we have kicked that horse too many times at this point. And I also have a feeling we're going to discuss this a lot, potentially in our next episode with the relationship. I think we have so much to cover between Keanu and Ava. I think we stick to our evicted house guest today.
All right. Well, then before we get to the rules, I do want to quickly mention that the Survivor version of the rules are available in a shorter and much more colorful version as a poster. You can go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed, scroll down to the poster, click on it, and order just in time for Survivor 49 season 2 have started. I recorded our first Why Blank Lost of Survivor just last night, less than, right about 12 hours ago. In addition to the poster, you can get that design on a t-shirt, or you can get the checklist design on a t-shirt, which is the closest to the Big Brother version, but as we've talked about, not quite the same. Well, Rachel told Keanu very early in the game, the whole house is against you. You are going to have to comp beast your way out of this or form some relationships that are real. She was absolutely right. And here Ava was the one who claimed to have magical powers. Why didn't Keanu heed Rachel's warning or advice? Did he ever realize what his actual situation was? And what about Ava? How did she make it to fourth place when it seemed like she wasn't really doing anything? It's time to take a look at both of their games because at RHAP, we know Big Brother and we know why Keanu and Ava lost. Now, the first and most important rule is to scheme and plot. With the two players we're discussing here, one did it a lot, but very poorly, and one did it as little as humanly possible. The first, of course, is Keanu, who has been one of the worst strategically all season long. And that is saying something with this group. I do want to mention that with him, there's a bit of a fine line to discussing Rule 1 versus Rule 2 items because most of what he did was bad scheming, but sometimes he moved into over scheming. So we'll try to separate those here, but there's going to be some overlap. Now, the funny thing about looking back through all my notes is that I see we had Keanu clocked in the very first few days of the game that we saw. Right away, a number of podcasters and live feed updaters saw he was unable to accept any new information once he had a thought about the way things supposedly were in the house. And the thing is, he never changed. He never learned. This one statement summarizes his game for the whole summer. Mostly. Because sometimes it was possible for him to accept new information if it came from a man. If it came from a woman, forget it. But a man could occasionally convince him.
Yeah, it's interesting because Keanu is a player that I feel like was aware of how strategy works. I mean, we see from his background being a Dungeons and Dragons game master, sees how actions and strategies work, but when it comes to utilizing those, it seems like it flashes by him. And I don't know if it was like a willful ignorance or it was something that he just decided he is going to ignore. I mean, he really put himself in a position of where he was always, I don't say it's like, but like the victim in situations, and he made himself in the. Some people motivate themselves, athletes, right? They try to put a chip on their shoulder, soldier, and they're always saying that, man, they're counting us out. He was always the one saying, they're counting me out. I gotta work. I gotta win this competition. But he put himself in those positions. He had to over strategize, over scheme. And again, I don't want to dip too much into the other portion, but that was a majority of the issue. His scheming and plotting was having to undo the errors of his own strategies.
Yeah. I think you raise an interesting point that he understood that there is strategy. He tried to use logic. He often would say, "You're not thinking logically," but it's kind of garbage in, garbage out. If you like feed a computer program bad data, it's going to come out with a wrong answer, even if the program itself works perfectly. So, and I'm not saying by any means that Keanu's brain from a strategic standpoint worked perfectly, but even if it had, his reads were so bad that, like, if he thought, well, these 10 people are with me, therefore this is the appropriate move, well, it would have been the appropriate move if those 10 people had actually been with him. But since they weren't, he's always going to get the wrong answer. And there are many examples of this, including, that 10-person one was a true example from the very beginning. I think it was 10. I forget the exact number because it didn't matter. And it was all fake anyway. But because he talked to people, this was very early in the game, and they said, yeah, we're with you. He was like, oh, good, we're all in an alliance together. Everybody has sworn to me that they're going to do it. No, you went to them and said, will you vote with me? And they said yes. And now suddenly you've created this 10-person alliance in your mind.
And there is something, maybe not for David, not for you, but to me, there's something endearing about a player who tries to utilize the strategy. And I mean, he's great. I mean, I had a ball watching him play the game in his own way. But yes, that's the issue. It's kind of, it's you have the recipe in front of you. You know what to do, but instead of baking cookies, you're baking brownies. You're using the wrong recipe for the wrong times. And that was kind of a constant thing we see with him because and I like that how he wants to keep trying different things and utilize things. And I mean, that's why so many of the rules it really match because he's like, okay, if this doesn't work, I'll use this. But sometimes he didn't have to do any of it. I mean, it was really such a, he was so active in the game, too
Yes.
active for his own good. And I don't think I've ever seen a player that really embodies overactivity with scheming and plotting that we've in this game than him.
Yeah, your recipe idea strikes me because it would be like if he's trying to make, like you said, cookies, but he was like, well, it says baking powder. I'm going to use baking soda. It says chocolate
Yep.
chips. I'm going to use potato chips. It says flour. I'm going to use flours. All those things are close, but it was a complete misread. It was like he was reading the recipe and just getting
Mhm.
all the ingredients wrong and then wondering why the cookie didn't come out. But there was someone who understood the recipe, who had the whole cookbook at her disposal. And she saw him as a person she might be able to work with and teach in order to make good use of his comp abilities. Of course, I'm talking about Rachel. This eventually led to a very on again, off again alliance that drove her crazy for all the reasons I just mentioned. His delusional beliefs that he was always right and knew everything that was happening in the house while ignoring whatever she told him. There were many examples of Keanu being completely wrong. I've narrowed it down to a relatively few highlights or lowlights. So, for example, when Mickey and Morgan were having a tiff, Keanu told Rachel, "Oh, they're not that tight." And Rachel was like, "Dude, don't be delusional. They've been a duo the whole game." He's like, "Nope, nope. They're not that tight. They're arguing. They're separate now." Now, of course, eventually Mickey did end up blowing that relationship, but at this point in the game, no, they came right back together again and we're back to being a duo. He saw one snippet of one conversation and immediately determined, "Oh, this is new, my new view of the game overall."
I think that really showcases a big part of his game where he utilized his perspective and his perspective only to get to an answer. And it would be difficult at times, even though he would get information from other houses, to take that in and update his perspective to see that, okay, there might be a different version that I'm not seeing here. And let me update my strategies to actually match that. So and I think we see a similar issue that we talked about with Kelly, kind of outrunning your problems that you're playing with because you can win competitions. And then
Yes.
you're also giving this false confidence that you are playing Big Brother or the game correctly and you're staying here longer because of the strategies and scheming you're utilizing. Rather, it is because of the competitions wins you're doing. Because, for many players who play like this, it would catch up to them quickly. But with him being an incredible comp piece and also in a season where there's competitions are really overflowing with the opportunities to kind of keep yourself safe, we see those decisions really not catch up to him until basically the end.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't apply for this rule, but there was he did one of the interviews he did. I think it was Dalton Ross, but I'm not 100% sure. He said, "Oh, my social game really kicked into gear right around when I was the butler, and that kept me safe until da 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 da." No, no, your social game never kept you safe. That was your impression of it. Just like you were talking about his strategic game. It's his comps all the way that kept him safe, and so getting back to examples, when Keanu and Vince were on the block together, he told Rachel he might throw Blockbuster to Vince because Keanu was certain that he had the votes to stay. And Rachel, to my dismay, told him over and over again that he was wrong, but he wouldn't listen. And then he went so far as to tell someone else that Rachel's reads were always so off. Luckily for him, he didn't end up throwing that blockbuster. Something did get through what I called his anti-reality shield, and it made it through, and he didn't throw it. But a big issue with him was, as I mentioned earlier, always believing the men. And worse than that, he thought the men were also closer to him than they were to any of the women, including their own showmances. So he told Riley that he had to be willing to let Catherine go. And then when Rachel told Keanu that Riley wanted him out, Keanu said, no way. In fact, he knew that he was Riley's number one, not Catherine. Rachel tried explaining it to him, but it was like attempting to teach a kindergartner to do calculus, even though it was a simple 1+1=2 equation. Literally, there was no way Keanu would accept the plain facts because he told Riley he'd better never betray him, and Riley said he wouldn't. That was it. Case closed. Riley said he wouldn't, so obviously he's his number one.
Yeah, his interest of making sure the bromance would continue through the entirety of the game, and then believe that would take precedent over other relationships. I mean, it goes back to not updating the scheming, the plotting, the strategies when you realize, oh, okay, well, the reality of it, the showmance is going to take precedent over your relationship with them. And also, we see that there truly isn't many other layers of strategies that he has with the other players, like the other men, that would make it that, oh, we on a strategic level are working together and you trust me over your showmances. I mean, we see that throughout the whole thing. When we see this with even Vince, I mean,
Yeah.
and I think he has this feeling that after a conversation, I mean, I go all the way back to Jimmy and him, is that I think Keanu is a very intelligent person, and there's certain things he can see, but he then feels that, okay, if I see it, then there's definitely no way they can see it. So thinking that now him and Jimmy might be cool after certain conversations. Oh, I'm lying to Jimmy. He's not lying to me. I mean, he takes things for face value, and I think that was the issue.
Yeah, and like you said, it continued the whole season. I mean, like as late as September 2nd. So this is after Riley was gone. Keanu still said, I was Riley's number one over Catherine. He he never got it through his head. And the situation, like you said, was the same with Vince and Morgan. He kept pitching Vince on doing things to get rid of Morgan, even after it was very clear to everyone else how close they were. And then he'd get mad when Vince would say no. When Vince told the story to Morgan, he noted that Keanu simply couldn't comprehend the situation. And Morgan was dumbstruck that Keanu didn't realize they were each other's number one. But again, to Keanu, Vince had to be his number one because, bros. And in a sort of reverse situation, he also couldn't see what was in front of his face when it came to Vince and Lauren's alliance because Keanu felt he had kept Lauren safe the previous week, so that meant she automatically became his ally, even though they hadn't discussed it and it was only in his own mind. He couldn't understand why she would nominate him and not Vince, even though they had all seen her go against Rachel's wishes to use the veto on Vince earlier. And it was very clear to everyone else that those two were also very close allies. He couldn't see it. He even asked her why. I don't know why you'd sacrifice me and not Vince. Dude.
It truly hamstringed his game. And I mean, you made a good point about it that he tended to really side with the men and listen to the men in the game versus any of the women in the game. And, at first you're seeing that, you're like, okay, maybe he has connections with these guys more so. But then you see this pattern go on in the game, how he speaks about it. And it really, impacted the strategic portion of it because he closed himself off of allies that he can have with the women in the house or trusting them. And like you said, he would go and think primarily the decision makers are through the guys, the bromances he have, just because of the bromance that he has
Yeah.
and that he has kind of manifested in his head, versus the other relationships with people who do want to work with him or maybe consider this player versus as a connection. Catherine is a +1 for Riley, or Lauren's a +1 for Vince as their own players. That's how he had to look at it. And so if he did just honestly update that portion of his strategy, we would have seen maybe a better version of gameplay from him, because then he would have looked at all players as their own players.
Well, yeah. I mean, you make it sound so easy that he could update it, but clearly he couldn't, because this happened all season long and he never, ever learned. I mean, sometimes he even exhibited classic signs of cognitive dissonance. He knew, quote unquote, knew he was bros with Vince, but then Vince would do something that was bad for Keanu's game. Therefore, to resolve that conflict in his brain, he made up situations. Usually the situation was that the evil Morgan had used her powers to convince Vince to go against Keanu. Obviously, Vince was helpless in these situations and therefore blameless. It was all Morgan's fault, and Keanu had to save Vince from the clutches of evil Morgan.
And there'd be times where we see as retribution, he would say, all right, well, I'm going to put Vince on the block. I have to put him on the block. He'll understand it. And then we're good to go. And I mean, he put these rules in his head where it was that, okay, well, this is now what you deserve, and I will do this to you, but then we're cool after this. I mean, it's interesting because he did put these arbitrary like goalposts in his mind that once I cross this, once I score this, or whenever we do this, we're back to square A and things are normal again, without realizing the repercussions of it. I mean, that was consistently his issues here, and from his fights with other people, it really hampered all portions of it, because when your strategy really just kind of changes on a whim, week in and week out, because when you have this ability of power where you're winning these competitions and then you have this level of safety for you that is finite, and then you have to go survive again, it consistently makes it so that all options he does and all actions he does is right after one after another. It's not planned out, it's all reactionary.
Yeah, I mean that's the perfect example is what you said, him nominating Vince to teach him a lesson. Because here's Keanu, a man with pretty much no allies other than the on again off again with Rachel, decided to nominate the one sort of ally he had. It was incredibly dumb for so many strategic reasons, and Keanu understood none of them. Like you said, he thought he'd nominate Vince. Vince would survive the week, and they'd be copacetic. Like they'd start over again. It never even occurred to him that Vince might, I don't know, be a little bit upset about being nominated and almost being evicted. Even after Vince talked about how worried he was, and Keanu said, "I'm at a point where you going home isn't worst case scenario to me." And when Keanu said he was, or I'm sorry, when Vince said he was Keanu's ally, Keanu said, "Are you?" So, yeah, I can see why Vince would immediately want to join back with Keanu after this week. I mean, it's clearly obvious why he'd want to do that. And yet, like you said, in Keanu's mind, yes, it was a reset. I do this to you, I teach you a lesson, and we're back to being cool.
And I think, this can be a positive for a lot of players. And for Keanu, it worked kind of against him. He didn't take things personally many of the times. I mean, sometimes he would get angry. We saw some certain fights, but typically that he would come back to. He wouldn't hold a grudge really after a fight, because he had fights with basically maybe everyone in the house. And I think he thought that's how other people would react to it too, where you have a fight, it's part of the game, you go back at it, and you guys, this relationship he has with Rachel, he consistently explains it as a, older sister brother vibe, where it's like, we still love each other. I'm not sure if that's the same feeling across the board. And maybe it is. I would love for that to be, but I don't. I think other players take a lot of his actions to heart and are like maybe more vengeful for it. It's not. It doesn't stop after they get one up on him. Like they put him on the block, now we're good. No, it continues on. And that was the way he kept judging it. And that's also how he strategized. He's like, all right, now new strategy. Don't need to worry about what I did last week. Each week's a new week for him. And he felt like it should be that. The other players should view it like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as part of that whole discussion that happened there, Keanu later said Vince was consistently choosing one person over the grander scheme of things. And that person was, of course, the evil Morgan. And because Keanu blamed her for just about everything, he hatched a plan to try to get her out even after she had won the veto. He told her if she used it on Vince, he would replace Vince with Lauren because no one wanted her in the jury. And then she, of course, would have the votes to stay, so she'd be perfectly safe. His real plan was to nominate Ashley as the replacement, so Ashley would stay and Morgan would be evicted. Now, this was just one of Keanu's crazy schemes that usually nobody went for, but somehow Morgan actually considered it for a short while. It helped that Vince played along, which was a scummy thing to do that he's going to have to answer for once the show is over. But I'm betting he'll claim, oh, I was always going to tell you if you didn't figure it out yourself. I was just humoring Keanu. That's another story. The point is that Keanu tried insane things like this and expected people to fall for it.
Yeah, it's when it's the boy who cries wolf so many times, people start to just not believe the person. And I think that was what Keanu. He has so many out there ideas, and again, this because every week for him, anybody could get it. All his allies, no one was really safe. And the only person who became kind of safe was Kelly with him, just because she was the one who was still on the block. But he didn't really have to worry about that because she was always in danger from her own way as well too. So because of this, each week he's putting himself in danger one after another for so many different ways, and he's putting all these different ideas. So it's a broken clock is right twice a day, and that was kind of some of his ideas eventually. But the other issue is that strategically it hinders him so badly because people stop taking his ideas seriously. It takes away a level of autonomy from him, and then really in his eyes, he thinks he is this strategic mastermind. While other people is just like, well, the reason we're hearing you out right now is because either we know you're going to win veto, you've won, the blockbuster. I mean, we're not giving you his ideas weren't given credibility. Actually, they were just kind of said it in front of him.
Yeah. And then moving on to another example, there was the situation that we saw the end result of on TV when a number of people who only watched the TV show thought that Ashley and Rachel were just being mean to poor Keanu. When he used Ashley as a renom. What they didn't see was Keanu offered Ashley an olive branch that would keep her safe for 2 weeks if she agreed not to use the veto if she won. Well, she didn't win, and instead Keanu nominated her as the replacement while denying that he ever said such things. There were literally people in my comments on videos saying, he never promised her safety. That's BS. It's BS if you only watch the show, but if you watch the live feeds, that wasn't BS. It was absolutely true. And I mean, don't get me wrong. Lying is part of Big Brother. It's part of this rule. That's fine. Just don't get high and mighty when other people do it.
Yeah, and I think that we see later in the game, Ashley and Keanu start to work together, and realizing they can benefit each other. But this could have been done way earlier in the game if Keanu was open to it.
Yes.
And he really kept turning on the women in the house versus the men. He gave him a lot of opportunities, even though he was burnt by him consistently. And he would kind of let it be. I mean, we go back to when the vote with Zach about basically, him deciding how he needs to figure things out. And you see Keanu burnt by all the men in the house each time, week in and week out. They're voting a different way than him. And he kind of just chalks it up, says, all right, well, I trust you now. I'll move forward with you. But if any of the women kind of went in his mind, out of line, he would not work with them. Or he would also, even when they work with him, he would just consider it a different reason. So it's one of those things that truly his game would have been so much more open because he's working only with half the house. And these people didn't want to work with him.
Less than half the house because they got rid of so many men early.
Yeah, very true.
Um, so now, eventually, a few things did get through Keanu's anti-reality shield and actually made it into his head. A week ago, he said on live feeds, Rachel's the only one who ever told me the truth. I tried to get her backdoored because she took Riley out, but that MFer was trying to get me out too. Interruption of the quote here. Remember, he didn't believe Rachel about that until Vince, a man, told him that it was true. He continued, literally everybody I ever advocated for, fought for, stabbed me in the back. And I was literally by myself this whole game. And yes, he was. But that's not a reason to admire him. Like, so many people say, well, I'm supporting Keanu because he was by himself, his back against the wall the whole game. His own terrible decisions put him in that position. Back on July 19th, he was talking to himself and said he didn't know what he was going to do because he couldn't keep fighting by himself week to week. And now we know, over 2 months later, that is exactly what happened. And unlike the nonsense version of the story believed by some Keanu stans, it wasn't because he was picked on or bullied. Like I said, it was because he did it to himself and then kept doing it to himself all season long. He trusted people he shouldn't, like Vince. He did not trust those he should, like Rachel. All while holding an incredibly high opinion of his abilities that was in no way impacted by reality. Indeed, in his final days, he even said, in a season where my talents were completely wasted, I did relatively well because I was good at comps. I couldn't strategize with any effing body because they were a bunch of dumbasses who didn't understand percentages. As usual, even all the way at the end of his game, it was everyone else's fault but his own in his mind.
Yeah, I mean, I love a good underdog story, and I found myself at times rooting for Keanu. I mean, we were laughing at some point. We're saying we're swapping basically our winner picks at that point, where you're rooting for Ashley, I was rooting for Keanu in a portion of it, and I think you want to see somebody who's trying their hardest, and for
Mm-hmm.
everything else, Keanu put all his effort out there. The frustrating thing was he was doing it to himself, week in and week out. His strategy did not change, and he was having to work overdrive, and each week was basically having to make up for the mistakes of last week, of somebody he made upset, or some conversation he had, some argument, and then it would be he targets the wrong person. He goes after these people and he doesn't have to. I mean, yes, there was a point where let's put Keanu on the block each week, try to get him out because we need to try to get him out. But also there was parts of it where we see this weird portion of the house because it was a very fluid house this year, from alliances working with other alliances. And I mean, watch all our episodes. We can talk about every house guest who, unfortunately, they kind of screwed over their alliances. I mean, every house guest this season really was like, let me get out my own house, like my friends in here. Let me just figure out how I can get anybody who's going to work with me, get them out. And for Keanu, it helped him in portions of it because it was so scattered, but he never took advantage of it. He never took the chaos and utilized it for his own good without winning competitions.
Yeah. All right. That was a lot, I know. You should see everything I deleted from my notes for Keanu in this role. But I think we can move on to Ava. And we have significantly less to discuss because, after all, she said herself a month ago, I don't have a brain that was made for Big Brother. I'm being serious. I don't think my brain works the same way as some of these people's brains work. And she was right. She didn't have a brain for strategy at all. Early on, very early on in the game, live feed watchers will remember this. She would literally get gas whenever anyone started talking about strategy. That it would affect her that much. And it makes me wonder why she was there. But then I remember she was trying to win America's favorite prize, not the overall prize for Big Brother. And still, even other people saw the same thing early on. Will was talking to Mickey near the beginning of the game and said he really liked Ava. Mickey said she forgot about her because she didn't talk game. Will replied, she doesn't. I think she's playing the wrong game. And that carried through most of the season. Later on, Ava would say, this game is so confusing, is hard. I don't like it anymore. And then after Mickey tried to strategize with her further down the road, she said on live feeds, "What the F happened this week? I don't even know what's going on in this house. Mickey throws info at me, and I get so tired. I go, okay, Mickey, I don't remember what she said. Who am I voting to keep? I'm done. Now Mickey isn't with Rachel, but am I with Rachel?" These were the deep strategic thoughts of Ava during the season.
Yeah, I remember pre-game, we had our assessments of each player, and you both and I had different opinions on Ava. I was optimistic that Ava could be a highlight of the season. I was interested of how they would play, and honestly, I will say the first week or two, initial game weeks, I was impressed because I thought it was kind of a cover up. I thought it was something where she did not want to have to give too much input, but she would get a lot of input from other people. I mean, strategically, I thought it's great. She's laying low. She's making these relationships in there. But I think this is, encompasses what Big Brother is. It changes. Strategy is so important throughout the game, and it gets a lot harder throughout the weeks and in months of the game when you don't have a concrete strategy to work on. Because her goal was basically avoidance. That was she tried to avoid arguments. She tried to avoid having her name because she never wanted to be in a position of where she had to make a decision, where she was put in a lot of middle positions where she could have had power and her strategy could have came from there. But her goal was to avoid any form of it. And that strategy maybe works in the beginning, but down the line it does not because it's not a strategy. It's the avoidance of the strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was a moment you mentioned early on, when she actually did get off the bed and make some strategic moves when her best friend Will was about to get voted out. She convinced Zach and Vince to flip to keep him and evict Adrian by laying out the people they'd piss off if they took out Will. And then they made, at the time we criticized that decision. Looking back, okay, but the decision they made at the time was not great, but she was the one who convinced them. But yeah, other than that, she was mostly anti-strategy. Even when she was HOH, she didn't have any one-on-one meetings. She only met with her true allies, which gave away her position to anyone who it wasn't clear to already. And she also didn't gain any new information or thoughts that she didn't already know, let alone getting any new promises or allies from being HOH. And even what she did was getting in the way of her naps and making her tired to the point that before the veto meeting even happened, she didn't want to talk about any more strategy.
Free agents are incredibly powerful this season of the game. And by that, I mean people who weren't connected to a specific alliance where they can move in and out of things. And in a season where we've talked about where people were turning on their own allies, their own groups, trying to make different moves. For Ava, this was, music to her ears because she was able to play a avoidance type of game where she didn't have to make big decisions. She didn't have to ally herself super strongly with anybody to make it farther in the game. And so this is a really good position to be in moving forward. But you need to do something with it. You need to take some action. You need to have a level of autonomy with it. And we kind of see her give up steam. I thought this was part of the strategy. But at the end of the game, you mentioned this. She had no strategy. She just wanted to win AFP, and that's just not a winning strategy. That's not, it's there was a lot of potential there that was just never met.
Yeah. Yeah. Even a lot of it, I think, went back to even after saying she didn't want to talk strategy anymore. She went to, and again, this was while she was still HOH. She went to what would end up being her usual refrain, saying, whatever happens will happen. And this became her answer to almost anything. That she literally said everything in the game is predestined. So that meant she didn't have to make any decisions. It was up to God or universe or whatever. And I guess it makes it a lot easier if you don't have to worry about strategizing because whatever will be, will be.
Whatever will be. And I wish she still at least utilized her relationships. And when Will was on the block later on the game, he didn't try super hard to keep him there.
She didn't
There
try at
weren't
all.
moves. She didn't try at all. Yeah. And that's what's frustrating because she was in actually a pretty solid spot moving into the game in this end portion of it, where you can see that she is not making an effort to strategize with people around her. People are seeing that where they're like, okay, well, I thought Ava was like Switzerland. She's kind of neutral. She doesn't want to do, but in realizing, oh wait, she's not just neutral from making people upset. She's neutral from the game. Like she doesn't want to play this game, and
Right.
players saw that, and it took away her autonomy. And people realized that, and it wasn't. I think at that point is it's when the ball drops. Oh, this isn't a facade. This is who Ava is, and this is how she's playing the game. Which is frustrating because she is one of the few players that I feel like usually we're saying at this point in the game, man, they did a little too much. She just didn't do enough. That was her primary issue.
Yeah, I mean, talking about the Will situation, that she wasn't doing anything at that point. She had been in a decent spot, but she wasn't going to use it to her advantage because the universe had already decided anyway. And so when Will was nominated again and things started to turn against him, which of course was a side effect of her hamster wheel decision, which I'll loop back to in a minute, but Vince came and asked her how she'd feel about them voting out Will. He was looking for a reason to keep Will. And she was like, she couldn't be bothered to provide him one when he was looking for one. She didn't have to try hard. All she had to do was say, well, I would like to keep him here for this and this. And then Vince would have gone back and told the others, no, Ava, doesn't want to. But no, she couldn't even be bothered to save her closest friend in the house. And, like I said, this was after she was forced to make a decision in the hamster wheel of death. And as usual, she did not think strategically at all. She ended up picking Vince to go first rather than Rachel. Now, she has made a number of contradictory claims about why she did it. Of course, there's the big deal she made about, oh, Rachel grabbed my arm, which is simply ridiculous and seemed like something she made up after the fact to justify her decision. Because she said in the moment that she chose Vince to go because so many people were aligned with him, so nobody would be mad at her for doing it, which is ridiculous because she was not aligned with him. She told Mike Bloom, it was my way of avoiding getting blood on my hands and kind of passing the buck off to him. So even when she had the opportunity to make a move in the game, she wanted to avoid it at all costs. This was not the time to avoid getting blood on your hands. At some point, you actually have to play the game. Well, apparently that statement's not true when it comes to Ava. But if you want to stick around, if you want to do well and have a chance at winning, that's what you have to do. And it cost Rachel, who was her ally and about whom she'd previously told Will, Rachel was very loyal and rode for her friends even when they were in danger. As usual with Ava, she was more concerned about what her non-allies would think than what about her allies thought.
As I've gone older, one of my biggest, and I feel like each week I'm bringing up a pet peeve of mine, but this is one of my pet peeves. So is when you say somebody comes visits you out of town or something, do they want to go out or do something, and you ask, what do you want to do? And they say, I don't care, you decide. And you're like, okay, well, we're here for you. Like, where do you want to eat? What do you like to eat? I don't care. I'm good with anything. It's an indecision, like the decision-making ability with people, it becomes tough. You want a friend or a person who can help have some options, have some choices in all life. And something so small about food, but in the Big Brother house, something even bigger than that is, can you make a decision on who you want to work with? And yes, you don't want blood on your hands, but at some point you need to have some form of action because you're so far in the game, you have to make some decision because then you can't be an ally to them. And in the game of Big Brother, that's the most frustrating thing, is having players or allies around you who won't make a decision to help you out in the game or one way or other, because not that they don't want to, it's because they just don't want to get involved there. And that was her primary issue here, is that, and I think that, I think all to be said is like, the way I view Ava is that she's not a bad player per se. She had the ability to be a really good player, and actually, a lot of the rules, I feel like she just didn't try on them. She didn't want to be active. It's like and A, because they're not putting themselves involved. And in the parts that they should be involved, they fail. But if she just was like, like it's the teacher who says, like, just sign your name and try and you'll get a C on here. She didn't try. She just was like, I don't want to even put my name on it. And that's the issue for her time in and time out of the game. That's fine for the first half of the game, but this final half of it, mute. Like, that's her strategy. It was just avoiding everything.
Yeah, it reminds me of this girl I knew in high school who she was getting terrible grades. And, I didn't know the details of why. But then we took like the SAT and the ACT, and she scored super high. And we were all like, well, what's going on here? Well, she was smart. She just didn't try. She didn't bother to do her homework. She couldn't be bothered to study for a test. And I mean, I don't know that I would say Ava would score high in a test of Big Brother, but there were times when she could be bothered to, open her eyes and do something. Like, I guess mostly we have to go back to flipping the vote for Will, that she could do it. She showed that sign, and then she was like, nah, I'm not doing homework for the rest of the season. I'm done with this class. And because of all that nonchalance, one of her answers in her interview with Dalton Russ really annoyed me. He asked what it felt like about getting taken out by Vince in particular. And she said, at some point, it was either him or me. He just got to me first. What are you going to do? Well, of course he got to you first, because whatever we may say about how he's playing, the fact is he's playing. She was not playing. So how was she ever going to, quote unquote, get him first? It doesn't even make sense.
And I think, it's interesting because we have two players we're talking about, right? Keanu and Ava. And really, they're parallels of things. Keanu inserted himself in basically everything when he didn't need to, and Ava did the opposite. She did not insert herself into anything when she needed to. And I think it's almost different where it's like we talk about going back to Lauren, where I was frustrated, where I was like, okay, she was on the wall, like, she had chances to jump in, and she just kind of made the wrong reads.
Mm-hmm.
She realized, like, okay, I didn't maybe press my finger on the trigger at this point to take that shot I need to. Versus Ava, she just sees it happening in front of her, and that's the more frustrating thing. Is a person who you can see them socially, if they're connecting with people, they're seeing the writing on the wall, and now they're in the position to do it. And what I'm so confused about is, why not? Like, what would hamper you? It's at the end of the day, it's like, sometimes if you do a race or something like that, go out there, you might sprint too far, you're not going to win, right? But you gave it your best shot. I don't feel like Ava gave it her best shot in this, and that's where I find it frustrating. And I think that will be a common theme as we go through the rules, where it's like, all right, well, I mean, she didn't do the worst of this. She just had to try a little harder. She wouldn't have been bad here, And that's kind of my answer for all of these rules with her.
Yeah, I mean, one thing before we leave these rules, or this, not these rules, just rule one, I should mention is that a portion of this rule says part of plotting and scheming can also be making good use of sneakiness. We know there are spots in the Big Brother house where you can listen in on conversations without being seen. Players should make good use of these when possible to find out what other people are saying behind your back. Now, we saw Ava gained knowledge a few times when other players would come talk strategy in the train room and not notice her lying in her upper bunk. The thing is, this wasn't something she did on purpose. It's not like she was laying there in wait. This was not a Tony Vlachos situation where he, created a spy bunker in order to listen in on people on Survivor. She just found herself there. But when they came in, she did stay quiet. She did pretend to stay asleep, even when they discovered her, rather than announcing herself. So she did gain some intel that way. But of course, gaining information doesn't do a whole lot if you don't turn around and use it. It's kind of like, inevitably, there are different, I watch a lot of, spy type shows, and inevitably, what'll happen is the hero of the story, the secret agent will come in and say, sir, we found this information and the attack is coming on this day at this time. And that person will be more like Keanu and say, no, I don't believe your intel. I'm not going to do anything with it because it wouldn't look good. That part was it was probably even less, less than that with Ava. It wasn't, I don't believe it. It was just, I'm not doing anything with it. Okay, I have this intel. Now I'm going back to sleep.
You see a player like Will, where there's a level of purposefulness when we talk about in his intentions were I want to be a wall where I can listen to things and I don't need to give much back. I'll listen to people. That's what they want to hear their own voice and they want to
Hmm.
be validated for the feeling. There's a purpose to gain this information and he had plans. Will potentially could have won this game if he goes farther. I don't know. We would see his end route, but there was a purpose of how he was taking this information, how he was wanting to utilize it. For him, there was no purpose, there was no intention for it. It just happened not because of the strategy to get this information, like you mentioned, where she's in these rooms sleeping. It just kind of happened, and she didn't utilize with that. That's kind of a big part of her game because I think naturally, yes, she's so. I imagine she's great to be around. She is very social, and people feel comfortable with her, and that will get you really far in the game. But you need to utilize when you're in those positions. I mean, it just that's kind of an ongoing thing for her. And so when we talk about, when she schemes and plots, she didn't scheme and plot really at all in the second half of the game because she didn't use she was just there and she utilized herself to kind of survive certain positions. But like I really feel like when things got difficult, she just like even she was like, I don't want to be a part of this. Do not put my name in this conversation. And she used her voice in that position, but it was never the whole strategy of her game was how can I get myself, remove myself out of the situation and not be a part of the equation.
Yeah. All right. Well, after a very long rule one, we can move on to the second rule, which says not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. And if it's okay with you, Ovi, I'd like to start with Ava because it's very simple here. She had no issues because, as we just discussed, she didn't scheme and plot nearly enough. Pretty much not at all for the entire game. So she certainly didn't do it too much.
I mean, she did so well this role where she kept it a secret that her own allies, were unsure, and she's trying to work with them too. I mean, they were confused because she confused her own allies. So yes, no, she did. She did the opposite of over scheme. That is
Yeah.
for sure. She didn't
So,
scheme.
yeah. So moving to Keanu, he definitely did have some issues here, as I mentioned earlier. One bit of conversation between Morgan and Vince on live feeds is a good indicator. Morgan said, "Do you know how easy it is to get information out of Keanu?" And Vince replied, "I have literally never asked him a single question, and he just spills his entire thought process." And really, that tracks. He was constantly telling people what his thoughts and grand plans were. And that often resulted in those plans failing, as we discussed. For example, when Zach and Riley were trying to get Lauren to nominate Ashley as the replacement in Lauren's first HOH, Keanu pushed a plan to her and others that she could do it and blame him. But as he was spreading it around, she was like, I don't want to be associated with him and this weird plan. So she went the other direction, pissing off those guys who were trying to get her to do it, all because Keanu overdid it.
Yeah, I mean, loose lips sink ships, and I mean, he consistently
He sank a whole
over-schemed
Navy.
his. Yeah, he over-schemed himself out of his scheming. I mean, he was his worst enemies in here. At some points, he was trying to do strategical moves, realizing that now he's countering them because he's telling the wrong people, he's working with the wrong people. It truly is crux to we talk about the bromance where he's telling the wrong people, but sometimes he needed to let the plans develop themselves. But he couldn't do that. He had to make sure every step of the way he was a part of it, and then he would bring in people who didn't need to be a part of it. I mean, it kept stepping on his own feet over and over and again. I mean, more so, this is the rule probably that hindered him so much.
Yeah, I feel like, a lot of the examples that we already discussed in Rule 1 involve, as I mentioned at the time, involved a lot of over scheming, sharing too much information, like when he would run and, do different things. So I don't want to repeat all those, but I want to focus on the biggest example in this whole situation, which was his interactions with Rachel. Because early when he wanted to work with her, she flat out told him he was so messy. He denied it, and all of us watching laughed. She gave him examples, and he denied it again, very poorly. This was something that came up a couple of times where she would list out the things he did wrong. And no, 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 no. He would either lie about it or misunderstand it. And he was a bad liar when it came to her. And this just continued through their whole on again, off again alliance. She would tell him to stop telling everything to Vince. He would then tell everything to Vince. She would find out, rinse, repeat. Keanu should have learned to keep Rachel's secret to himself. But he also certainly should have learned that Vince couldn't be trusted. Instead, he kept trusting Vince till the very end and even tried to push Vince to nominate Rachel, which, of course, again, got back to Rachel.
Yeah, and I think it's like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, essentially. Fool me 3 times, can't get fooled again. I mean, that was the issue with it, because he would see, with this exact example we see, it kept coming back to him. Rachel would be like, hey, like, what are you doing? Like, stop this. And he's like, Vince, why are you telling her this? And he's like, okay. And he tells her again. He would realize that everything is coming back to it. But the leaky faucet, it's not Vince. It must not be Vince. It must be something else. Vince is still working with him. No. I mean, he would keep on trying over and over. Like, when a plan didn't work. And I think this is a primary issue. When a plan didn't work for Keanu, he just didn't let it quit.
Yeah.
Like, he's just like, all right, let it. He's like, how can I fix this and make this plan work again? And he would keep on going over and over again. I mean, it is truly so. I mean, the funniness of that, him and Rachel became as close as they are, and they kind of worked this weird frenemy group because they had no one else to work with. I mean, just imagine if he decided, hey, all right, one time's enough to try getting out Rachel, get off these other people. Let me try laying low and letting it be. But he was unable to do that.
Yeah, the way you talk about his plans not working and keep trying, he was like Wile E. Coyote. He kept trying to catch that roadrunner, and no matter how many times it would blow up in his face, he was like, oh, now I have a new plan. Now I have something that's really going to work this time. Me and my Acme Rachel trap, they're going to work. And then it would blow up again, and he'd keep on trying. Just before Rachel was taken out of the game by production, by production stupidity, Keanu seemed to finally get it. He later told Kelly that when he talked to Rachel the day before, he could see the tears in her eyes, and he realized she was looking at him the way he looks at Vince when Vince betrays his trust. He had betrayed Rachel. But of course, by that time, it was too late.
So, all his moves are so short-sighted, and I think that's a common theme with it. It's like, when he gets Rachel out, right? What would be the point of it next? What's next? You haven't won the game. And I think that's so frustrating watching him play. Like, I enjoyed Keanu truly. It was great TV. And I am if there's anything I'm sure about, we're going to see Keanu in some shape or form down the line in any other show. Like, he will be a mainstay because he is really entertaining. He's fun. I want him to win something, though. I want him to win something. And I hope he takes away from this experience is that some plans can be abandoned. And you can also make sure that some of your plans don't need to be short-sighted. Just let it be and work for the long game, because that's the issue in his game. It's like every week was week by itself, and he always had to overcompete, overcompensate. He combined just a little bit of just like let it chill for a little bit with his competition prowess, and this man is golden. I mean, even with everything going wrong, he is still a danger to win the game at the end if he makes it that way. With zero capability with a strategic component with players, like he might still win the game if he's at the end. So it's yeah, I mean, just a little tweak in here, and he'll win something.
I mean, if Fessy can go on to become like a mainstay on a show like The Challenge, then obviously Keanu can. Keanu is a million times more likable than Fessy, in my opinion. And I mean they're both about equal strategically, which is bad. But I think that Keanu seems to be less driven by anger than Fessy, but who knows what'll happen once he starts getting on the episodes of The Challenge. We'll have to see. All right.
I will say with Keanu, I do think, here's the thing is, from our interviews and afterwards too, we've seen of his stuff. He takes everything, and in the same game, doesn't take things personally. So I'm thinking that he's going to still enjoy the experience regardless. He's one of the players I feel like who could actually see this stuff and be like, you know what, it is what it is. I did this stuff wrong. that's the thing is that's why I love watching players like Keanu play this game, even though it drives David crazy. Is like they want to be there, they want to try, and that's
Yes.
what I appreciate. And it's like you tried to play this game, like you didn't try, you played this game, you competed at this game, you got far, and it's just like your strategy kind of took you in the wrong place versus somebody who just doesn't care to be there. That's way more
Right.
frustrating, and
Oh,
we have that.
absolutely.
We have that this season. So many people, but unfortunately, this episode, it's two sides of the coin.
Right. Right. And yeah, I mean, with Keanu, I mean, we'll have plenty more to say about him. So let's continue into the third rule, which talks about needing to be flexible. Oh, I know what I was going to say. You said you feel like he can see this sort of thing and admit that he was wrong. I don't think he's at that point. I think when if he does any later interviews, obviously the one he did so far was just the you get asked 5 questions or whatever. But if he does any later interviews, I think he will be one of the people saying, no, 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 you just didn't understand it. You didn't see what I was seeing, because that's the way he was in the whole game. And I think that will continue out into the interviews. So we'll see what happens.
We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. Now, the third rule talks about being flexible. And considering everything we've already said about Keanu, I think the answer for this one is pretty obvious. In fact, it was so obvious that in the very first week of the show, Taryn said Keanu has to be the most inflexible player ever. And he just never got any better. That was the first week of the show.
I mean, I agree. I mean, I think actually, here's the thing: yes and no. I think there's part. He was flexible to what Keanu wants, and when he sees it, he will change his ways with it. But he has to see it; it has to be in his mind, and he has to be convinced otherwise. Like I think about Rachel, for example, and his relationship with her, where they had this back and forth relationship. They have this arguments, and then eventually he's like, "I will work with Rachel." It's just it takes so much for him to get to that point. And it could be one of those things where it's like you send so many shots, eventually you have to just be like, all right, there's only so many shots I can take, and send it their way. I have to change my ways. Unfortunately, I do think he was flexible his ways, but it takes him way too long. But here's the thing: is maybe everyone can be that way if they have 9 lives. I mean, because he was able to win so many competitions and be able to survive so many things, I think it would be impossible to not change your ways in some shape or form after seeing the repercussions of your actions week in and week out. So, yes, I think as a whole, very inflexible player. But I do think as the game went on, he started making some changes because he realized if he wants to stay in the game, he has to do something different.
Yeah, I mean, yes, occasionally, like you said, he took so many hits. That's why I call it his anti-reality shield. Because it's like when you're on Star Trek and they keep getting blasted by phasers and shields are down to 80%, shields are down to 40%, shields are down to 10%, and eventually it gets through. Yes, but it shouldn't take 5 hits on his anti-reality shield to get through to him. And yet it did. So now, at one point later in the game, Vince said Keanu feels a sense of entitlement, as if people should better his game. But I have to say, Vince wasn't right about that, because I think Keanu truly believed what he was saying many of the times when he was like, well, if you do it this way, it would be good for you and for me. The problem was he had such a poor read on the house that he didn't understand why it wasn't true. And then he got frustrated when other people wouldn't see it that way. And then they got frustrated back at him because they knew what was actually happening and he was unwilling to budge from his position. So to them, it looked like, oh, he's being selfish. He has the sense of entitlement. No, he really did think this was a good idea. He just couldn't see how bad it was.
Yeah, it's funny enough when you say that because he really wanted to play a team game and ride for the team. Like, all right, so what we do as a team. He just couldn't find a team to ride along with him. Uh, and for anyone who did, they basically very quickly went out of the house. No, I mean, I think it shouldn't take that many shots to be flexible in there. I think he might have been forced to be it. But yeah, I mean, it took him a very long time. Uh, and I mean, that's also the basis of his game, right? Is this level of chaos where each week and week out, like, this is what you do. And we go back to the winning of the competition is you don't have to change your ways. You're kind of
Right.
confident in what you're doing, saying that, okay, I'm on the right path because I'm winning. It's the same people, not the, is there people who are like, all right, if they hate us, we're doing something right, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe not. There's a reason maybe why they hate you, okay? Maybe you have a bad opinion. Like, that's why we dislike you. And so I think if you take that into reality TV world, you put in this thing that maybe, you're being persecuted in the game because you're making the wrong decisions, not because of,
Yeah.
you're in the right.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, a slightly more difficult question to answer in this rule is how Ava did with it. I think it kind of puts us back near Kelly territory, which we discussed, last week. What are your thoughts about Ava here?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I don't think she is very flexible in this part of the game because I mean I always say that you need to be challenged, and we see she was challenged and she decided to avoid it. I think that's indifference to being flexible is just part of it, meaning you're inflexible. I mean, if she didn't change up her game at all throughout the entirety of the season, as from everything I've accounted for, like when her allies working with Rachel or seeing different decisions of maybe let's work with them. She was upset when Rachel grabbed her hand, or when we see Will basically walking into, she didn't make a move to kind of keep him there. I mean, with Keanu, she didn't really try to change up different ways to work with him down the game when she was a little upset with him. I mean, there's just no changing of her games to kind of move in directions when she had ample opportunities to do that. She just avoided it all. So, I mean, I would probably say she was pretty inflexible.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. For Kelly, I said to be flexible, you need to have a starting point, which she didn't have. And I think Ava was similar. Sometimes she played the game a little, mostly she didn't. And as we discussed in Rule 1, she absolved herself of all responsibility by saying, whatever would happen, and the universe will take care of it. That's kind of the ultimate in being inflexible. You're not going to bother to do anything to change because, what's the difference anyway?
100%. And I think, we think about this, I think everyone knows somebody like that in their life where they're like, all right, well, you know what, I will just take whatever the flow takes me. But sometimes when you're put in a situation, you're put in that situation maybe for a reason, for you to take action.
Yeah.
You can't just always wait for something to happen. You have to let it take it, and then you work it. You're in the situation, do something about it. And you're a big brother. You applied for this. Like you know why you're here. So this is a situation where like, yeah, I mean, see where the game takes you, but you got on in here for a reason. It's now time for you to do something about it. And we never see that gumption from there. And we see it them at the end of the time when they're getting out of the house, realizing, oh, my time's up. Like I'm frustrated. Why I'm going to burn this house down. Where was that before? Or do
Right.
something actually.
Right. Well, and her idea also of burning the house down was, I'm going to have a house meeting with 3 other people and tell them all things they already know.
Yeah.
Hey, Morgan, did you know Vince lies? No. I mean, come on. All right, we can go to the 4th rule then, which says players should not let their emotions control them. Keanu has been saying throughout the game to different people, from Kelly to Dalton Ross, that he was one of the few people who could separate game from personal. And you've actually echoed this already. So do you think he actually did it?
I mean, I think yes or no. Here's the thing: is I think his emotions actually led him in a lot of times in the game. I mean, we talk about him, being angry at Ava at one point. We've even seen on the show where it was like during the HOH stuff, she was the one hosting something. She did give it to him right. He had a little he was upset,
Yeah.
and then
I believe
he
you
said
have a
some things.
prompt.
And yeah, you believe you have a problem, and then it becomes a thing. I think there's like he wouldn't hold grudges. He wouldn't be like, okay, it keeps him admitted, but he would act emotionally. He would be upset about this. He would get arguments with every single person in the house, with Ashley, Jimmy, Rachel, the list goes on. I mean, he acted upon it, but for his thing was that he would let it go. So I think it was a mixture of it. Yes, his emotions impacted how he played the game, but I think for him as a personally for him, it wasn't something where he's like, it's going to now send him down a line of where he has to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I don't really think it quite meant what he thought it meant for the reasons that you were talking about. We saw him get angry at people for disagreeing with him in the game. More importantly, we saw him make decisions based on getting upset. The perfect example is, of course, the situation we discussed in Rule 1 of him putting up Vince to, quote, teach him a lesson. And, of course, what happened before that when Keanu met with Vince and ripped him a new one, yelling at him, calling him a liar, etc. There is no strategic value to, quote unquote, teaching someone a lesson. It is purely personal, as were some of the things he said, like, you're making me look like a fool to my other allies. Or when Vince told Keanu he would never put him up and always considers his opinions, and Keanu replied, then you can take my opinion and blow it out your ass. He tried to couch all of this in strategic terms, but it was clearly done because Keanu was mad at him. And this had an obvious negative lasting impact on his relationship with Vince, even though, as we discussed, he was too blinded by his delusions to see it.
Yeah, no, I think the way I see it is that it influences his decisions, where it controlled everything. I'm unsure, but I mean, I think any player would be kind of kidding themselves, or person saying like Keanu was an emotional player. The way he acted upon it, and I mean, I think I don't want to skip to Ava about it, but I think that for her
Go ahead
specifically,
and skip.
it's tough to say because I think there was parts of it where she was emotional about the game. I mean, with the Rachel situation, about other portions of the game. But I do think that like it maybe just added to her being avoidance of it all. I think she tried to avoid any decision making, and I don't know whether it was because of her emotions or not. It just added to the fact that she was like, "I'm not going to be playing the game at all." So I don't know if it control. I think maybe we can say it controlled her, but in a way, I just don't know. I feel like it's an NA for her.
Yeah, I feel like Ava was pretty much all emotion. That was her entire package there. The one time she actually played the game, which we discussed earlier, was when she got the vote turned against Adrian to save Will. And she cried for quite a bit for Adrian at the time. And I considered in that moment, I wrote, probably on Blue Sky and then in my own notes, that I thought it was great Rule 4 behavior because even though she had those feelings, she still got Adrian voted out. But it kind of feels like that took everything out of her. She took that one action. She was upset by the results, even though she was also happy about Will staying. And then she pretty much took no other actions, like we said. You can't have, like you said, NA, you can't have your emotions interfere in your game if you don't have any game.
Yeah, it's just it wasn't part of how she like. I think like maybe she would have taken more like I mean maybe we talk about the safety loop essentially of who she picks first, and because of that decision, because I don't think it was strategical. I think it was completely emotional. I think it was that. So maybe we say that part of it, but overall, the most I think maybe if she let emotions control her game a little bit more, we would have seen more action.
Yeah.
We like we saw her, like we would have seen her do something. So yeah, I think it was unfortunate on both their ends on that part.
Yeah, I should mention the Rachel arm grab here, like you mentioned, the safety chain. Because if she really did decide not to pick Rachel because of it, then that was clearly an emotional move. As I mentioned earlier, I suspect it was mostly a rationalization after the fact. Like she really just wanted to, quote unquote, avoid blood on her hands. So instead she, blamed Rachel. But either way, it's bad. Whichever rule it broke, it was a terrible decision.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so the fifth rule says players need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. We have a somewhat interesting situation here with Keanu because I think that deep down and mostly even outwardly, he is a nice guy who would probably be fun to hang out with and fun to have as a dungeon master. A month and a half ago, Blue Sky user Tookie posted, people wonder why Keanu is so liked, even though he's awful at the game. And it boils down to he's delusional, but he's not mean. And I think that summed it up well. It's why he may indeed win America's favorite player because many fans view him as this sort of lovable big lug type of guy. And more importantly, he's gotten a very good edit on the show that hides the flaws that we've talked about. But even with those flaws, for many people who have watched him, they put those aside or they ignore him and they're just like, he seems like a nice guy.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to their intentions. I think a lot of players, I think that's why it frustrated players, and people would be able to feel they could argue with him openly and have arguments and then kind of come back to having other conversations because in some shape or form they're like, all right, you're so wrong, you're so like unaware of this, but like your intentions are not exactly bad. Are you trying to truly mislead us? Are you trying to truly like, or do you realizing, oh my goodness, you believe what you're saying? And I think ironically that works in his favor in this portion because they're like, it's one of those things where it's different when you have somebody who tries to convince you, they don't believe what they're saying. They're selling snake oil, but it's versus somebody who like might be wrong about it, but they vehemently believe what they're saying. So you're like, all right, well, you're wrong, but like I appreciate your candor. I appreciate that you actually believe in what you're saying here. That can be with friends, it can be with other people you don't know. And I think with Keanu that works really well because you can see he is well intentioned, and like you said beforehand, when he was making the strategies, right, with certain people, he truly believed this was best for their game. Some players didn't see it that way, but in his mind, this is the best version for you. Like for you and I as a team, we can work forward by doing this. And so I think that kind of bled through with his whole social game and how he is as a person.
Yeah. Now, with that said, I do want to talk about those flaws because they did impact the game, whether or not his fans saw them or even want to believe they exist in some cases. Some of the things we've already discussed, such as him always wanting to align with the bros no matter what. That obviously impacted his ability to work with or even have a social game with the women in the house. Multiple times through the season, we saw him being condescending, but only to the women, telling them they didn't really understand what was happening in the game when they definitely knew it better than he did. I mentioned earlier how we only saw Ashley's speech against Keanu on TV while he acted like he was innocent. But she was absolutely right about the way he treated them. TV viewers only, those who only watched it on TV, just had nothing to go on because all of that wasn't shown.
Yeah, I mean, granted, he got a good edit there
Oh, yeah.
in a lot of ways. But yes, I mean, he was polarizing in that. And I think that's kind of the interesting dichotomy of Keanu, who really, yes, he well intentioned in a lot of ways, or like he believes in what he says, but he was so outwardly like he tells it as it is to like anything that's on his mind. He just like, look, lets it out there. He has an issue with you. He's going to talk about it. He's not going to hide it. So yeah, he's a little bit of the antithesis of it because he's not pretending in any shape or form of this. He wasn't pretending to be
Well,
nice.
yeah.
He wasn't trying to pretend to do anything. But at the same time, I think because he wasn't pretending, it worked in his favor in some shapes or forms. At the end of the day, though, did it further his game strategically or not? I don't think so very much. I mean, I think people work with
Well,
him, but
yeah.
I think it was if he wasn't winning these competitions, this was his social game. That wasn't going to stop him from leaving the house, and so in this essence, it didn't help him stay.
Right. I mean, it almost got himself voted out a little earlier. He almost got voted out instead of Kelly when he was an ass to Ashley. And as usual, telling her she didn't know what she was talking about when she was, in fact, correct. And during that conversation, he even turned to Vince to act like, look at her, she's crazy. Yeah, because, Vince is a guy, so he gets it. Like, look at her. Huh? And so, I mean, Ashley recovered and realized, no, it's better for my game if I get out Kelly first and then Keanu. But that was the thing. Keanu, like I said earlier, he did this interview where he said, well, my social game really kicked in and kept me around. And it even helped, when Vince broke that tie. It wasn't your social game that did it. It was everybody else's plans. Your social game almost got you removed even sooner.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see a rewatch for that portion of it.
I don't think I'll be rewatching this season, but uh all right, well, we can move to Ava. Whatever games she did play, it was almost entirely social because, as we discussed, it sure as heck wasn't strategic. She basically skated by on the strength of people liking her, which is fine. And a lot of fans liked her early as well. I found her surprising early on. And indeed, at one point, Will told Vince, I trusted Ava from day one. It's so weird, this game, a 50-year-old man and a flower child. But as time went on, more of her deeper personality came out. We saw her making nasty comments about people like Rachel. She purposely let slip certain negative opinions about other players. Now, I don't know that it really impacted her in the game itself, but it did hurt her image for fans. I saw on social media some people who had been standing her were like, ooh, I'm going to step back and maybe even criticizing her. And of course, any hope for winning America's favorite was long gone, especially as she talked about wanting to win America's favorite. And it became clear that she was doing certain things just to try to gain that favor. It was not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably her best category out of all of them. I mean, her social game is what kept her through. I mean, she was so easy to connect with for each of the house guests there, and it put her in so many good positions. I mean, because of her social game, she was able to play this avoidance for so long and like not take any blood on her hands because she was. People were like, "Oh, well, this Ava just wants to be here with us around here, and it's going to be a lot for her to take on this responsibility of making this decision. So let it be." And if people didn't like her as is, this wouldn't have floated for as long as it would have. I think to your credit, her saying essentially having the fans turn against her in certain ways, even though I don't know, it's not related to the game in itself,
Right.
means that she pretended to play a really good social, like pretended to be nice to the fans in a way, shape, or form there too. I mean, she was able to really, none of us realized why she was there, like why she was playing the game until at the end when she talks about like this is the reason she wants to be, for AFP or other reasons. Because it wasn't there to win the game. She didn't make any actions to win the game. And regardless, I don't know what might come out of it later on, but I mean, yeah, this rule for her, great.
Yeah, I do have to mention that in Ava's pregame interview, we talked about this at the time. She said her strength was that she reads people's auras for a living. And as I pointed out in our preview podcast, her secret weapon was an imaginary power. And indeed, she proved that time and time again in the game. She misread people over and over. And I mean, after the very beginning, when they were all just playing up to, the people they came in as, I don't think we really heard her talk much about auras. But one of the misreads, the biggest misread she had, was she thought Riley was absolutely the greatest person. She was constantly praising them. She pretty much disproved any thought that she could read auras right there.
Yeah, I don't know if Aura will be the thing that she keeps on doing post show, but it didn't unfortunately help her. I mean, she did get the aura of Will, right? Or Will had a really good aura, but I do think that was probably pretty clear to see for most of the house guests.
Yes. All right. Well, the sixth rule says not to be too much of a threat. It is pretty clear that throughout the game, Keanu was seen as a threat for a few reasons. First and foremost, look at the man. He was, of course, going to be viewed as a comp threat, and indeed, comps kept him around in the game for much longer than his strategic and social game otherwise would have. As the game neared its end, comps started getting more and more physical and geared towards his talents, meaning it was even more imperative for people to get rid of him when they had the chance. And Keanu gave them that chance by foolishly not paying close enough attention in the Mastermind's lair comp and letting his sword drop because he was just kind of, some people were like he threw it. No, it's in a way worse than throwing it. He just wasn't paying attention. He wasn't focusing. He was too busy chatting and boom, there it went.
Exactly. I mean, him being a threat was a big part of his game. Interestingly enough, it helped him in certain parts because he became such a big threat that he became a shield for certain players. But each week there was, if he was not winning one of those competitions, he would have gone out so much earlier. And I think at some point people then became worried that like, all right, well, he's doing all this stuff. Like, does it matter anything I do next to Keanu when he wins this many competitions? Because a lot of players, especially in a season full of competitions, I think it kind of turned people's mind where it's like, all right, well, at this point, it's getting kind of impressive, you know? It's getting impressive that this person is just keeps on winning it out. And then we saw other players who had to win out competitions, and you have some players who didn't. So it kind of became a little divide where people who won competitions were like, all right, well, you know what? This guy who's winning competitions might be worthy of a win, you know? I mean, we see Kelly, right, talking about that. I think other players too felt like, okay, we're giving if the show is giving a little bit more credibility to winning competitions, that's how you win this game, maybe we should start thinking about that too. So I don't think he was a threat too much because of strategic stuff, but I think that portion of itself really made him very worried in other people's eyes.
Yeah. And, even beyond the comp aspect, he was a threat just to mess up people's plans and indeed knock them out if he kept going. And then there was the possibility he could actually make it to the end. Now, I really don't know what would have happened if he got to final two. But the perception for a while among at least some of them has been that he would be viewed as an underdog who was targeted and survived and redeemed himself. Indeed, Keanu believed that himself and told Dalton Ross that he thinks Vince kept Morgan instead of Keanu because she, quote, made a really good argument as to why I was the front runner to win, particularly because of my underdog story. So I believe that's ultimately why he chose to put me up over her on the HOH that I went home. Now, of course, a lot of that is the typical Keanu delusion about, well, Morgan convinced Vince to pick him over me, that evil Morgan, inside Vince's mind. But aside from that, he had that same underdog reference. I have no idea if it would have worked. I think for some it could have, depending on who he was up against. For example, up against Vince, yeah, I could see people not necessarily voting for Keanu, but voting against Vince. Up against Morgan? I don't think so. I think she beats him. Still, if you're one of those people who are still in the game, why risk it? Take out someone who might be a threat and leave in those who appear to be less of a threat.
100%. And I think it's one of the things where when you have an argument with somebody or an enemy, right, and they are at the end or best, and you're like, all right, well, you know what? They're at the end. They played it gives you some credibility. Of like, all right, I went against him, and this is the winner. I lost against the winner. And I think some people might have viewed it like that. I think truly Rachel begrudgingly might have gave her jury vote to him. Maybe even Ashley, which is crazy to say that, be like, all right, like, hey, fair is fair. I tried, I called you out, you're there,
I don't think Ashley's ever giving him the vote, just based on what she said on the live feeds about him and the way he treated her and the other women. I don't see that, but
probably not. But I think there's an argument to be there's no in routes that he can make. He has some sort of autonomy over getting those things. So I mean, all of those. I mean, he was one of the bigger threats of this entire season.
Yeah. So what did you think about Ava in this role?
I would have thought Ava was a bigger threat or middle of the game where I think people, when I was viewing, I was like, oh, interesting. Like, this is how she's playing. She has a lot of good relationships on this jury now. She's not making too many people upset. But I think it's a light bulb switch in us as viewers, but also in the players realizing Ava's not really doing anything in this game. Like, she doesn't want to be a part. Like, she doesn't want to be a part of this game. She's just here, and I think her threat level kind of went away there. I think the only threat was maybe that people wanted to keep bringing her along. She might take a spot away from in that final two to be dragged to the final two essentially because she wasn't beating anybody left in that final four of people. So it's who do we get rid of? Maybe she'll be a number for somebody else, but it wasn't until the end to get rid of her because she really wasn't allying with anybody super closely. So they're like, all right, she's not even a number for somebody we can worry about. We probably could sway her on our side. So threat level, minuscule for me.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like she was in somewhat of a similar boat to Keanu, at least earlier, like you said, because people kept saying she'd win at the end because of her social game. I would just call it social without the, quote, game part, as we discussed. Now, Vince told Lauren a couple of weeks ago that she would, quote, beat all of our asses. But also, Vince had ulterior motives in wanting to strip Lauren of her allies. So I'm not even sure if he believed it or not. And once more, I'm not sure if I believe it or not. Could Ava beat Morgan or Ashley? I tend to think not. Vince, maybe for the same reason we discussed as Keanu, the people voting against Vince. But even then, maybe not, especially after a jury roundtable led by Cody, who I'm sure will emphasize comps and strategy, not her type of social behavior.
Yeah, and I know people, dislike Vince here. I just think that when it came down to it, I don't think she's. I think you
Yeah.
look at that resume there, and what can Ava point at? And I think, to be completely, I don't think she would point at anything. I think she'd be, I didn't upset any of y'all. We were friends during the house. I feel like I didn't have to get any blood on my hands, and I'm here at the end. That would be her argument to win the game. And I just don't think it's a very convincing argument.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she talked several times about how she made it to fourth place, but like, okay, this was, I played so well, I made it to fourth place, but it's mostly because she wasn't enough of a threat to worry about earlier. As I said, she kind of just skated by until the people who were actually playing the game decided she might be someone to worry about a little bit in the end. So let's just get rid of her now. Because, like you said, who is she aligned with in that group? Nobody.
And, and I think Ava is probably a very nice person and fun to hang out with. And I
Just
think
don't pull her arm.
no pull her on. But it's frustrating because she was. There's no excuses. She was in the right positions, right times, right allies, and she just did nothing with it. Like she could have been
Yeah.
seen. There's certain players we go there and you're like, they didn't have much of a chance, or they screwed themselves. No one hurt Ava's game more than herself. It was just the inaction there. So she had the ability to be the biggest threat of the season, the underdog to come out of nowhere and then be like boom. But she didn't want to be that.
Yeah. Well, the seventh rule says to trust almost nobody, and Keanu had no problems here at all. No, none, nada. He knew not to trust anyone. Well, as long as it was a woman, But the bros, well, as we've discussed, he trusted all of them if they showed him even the slightest bit of attention. All right, seriously though, I don't think we need to spend much time or any time rehashing what we've said about Keanu trusting the wrong people all season long. I could have separated that out from rule one into this rule, but it was just so entangled into his general poor strategic play that it made sense to leave it all in one place rather than trying to pick it apart. I don't know if you have anything to add for this one.
I would just be regurgitating everything we said. I mean, simply this portion of it is he told everyone the wrong plans or the right plans of his plan all over and over again. I wish he trusted nobody truly, and then he would have been fine.
Well, yeah, like we said, trusting Vince time and
Yeah,
time again, and it kept getting back to Rachel time and time again.
and it keeps on repeating that, keeps
Right.
on redoing it. It's like, why don't you just stop? You see what's happening here,
Yeah.
but no.
As for Ava, she confusingly told Dalton Ross, I was pretty trusting in the house. Maybe I could have not been so trusting, but I think that if I wasn't as trusting as I was, I wouldn't have made it as far as I had. So no regrets, but maybe next time be a little bit more wary of people. First, I don't know that there will be a next time. Why would you bring back someone who slept through most of the game? But aside from that, I don't know what trusting had to do with her making it to Final Four. Unless she's saying she was not really playing, so they could just pull her along and get rid of her when they wanted, which is essentially what happened. But I suspect that's not what she meant because, yes, she did indeed need to be wary of people, or rather, she would have needed to be wary of people if she had actually been playing. But no reason to really worry about it if you aren't.
Yeah, I wish actually she trusted more people to work with them in the sense of like actually employing strategy and going through the game with them. I think about like Will, right? Yes, on a social level, she trusted these people, but on a game level, it didn't feel like she did very much so because she didn't take any action with them to kind of take blood on her hands or do something of it. So to me, this part of it becomes like it's like an A again because like yes, in the game theory, yeah, you didn't, or but it's it didn't help your game. You did this, you didn't employ to better yourself.
Right. All right, well, now we can move to Appendix A because we need to discuss the jury phase. But in some ways, we've already covered much of this in terms of why they needed to be sent to jury at this point. But if they hadn't been and they made it to the end, I don't really think either of them did much to prep the jury to vote for them. And this goes back to what we were saying about would people would either of them win, and if they did, it would be because who they were up against. We didn't see goodbye messages from them outlining their strategy. I mean, for Ava there was nothing to outline. So meanwhile, we did see the actual final three crank up their own jury management and their goodbye messages as each of them explained they were in this alliance and that's why they made the moves they made for the game. Now, the thing is, with all of them having essentially the same message, I'm not sure how much of an impact it will make because it's like if everybody says I was in this alliance with these people and that's why we made the moves, well, then now you're all on equal footing.
Yeah, I don't have much to say with Abe on this portion by any means. I don't think there was any prepping there. I don't. I mean, I think her own allies would be like wondering, like, hey, why didn't you try a little harder for me?
Mm-hmm.
In her case, with Keanu, I think his game speaks for itself. I don't
Yeah.
think there's anything he could like. I think there was no secrets right from him for anybody. He wasn't holding on any secrets. So I think his game is what you get is what you see, and I think the jury was prepped enough. Like if they like him enough already, they would vote for him. So I don't think there's anything he could have said that would be. I think the only player truly that could have has still the ability to do that is left there is like Ashley to surprise
Yeah.
people where it's like hey, actually mic drop, I'm a lawyer and this was my plan to play, ditzy in all these positions, yada yada yada, all this stuff. um so I think that's the only person that could actually make a big impact.
Yeah, I do want to mention, by the way, I had forgotten about this. She told Will that she was a lawyer. So Will,
Did she?
yes, on live feed, she told him. And
Oh,
so
okay.
Will has brought that information back to the jury house.
Mm.
Will he tell anyone? I don't know. I would like to think so, but it's possible. One thing that I've been saying through our podcasts is, well, it's a lot to get across to people in just, 1 or 2 minutes. Maybe she planted enough of a seed if she makes it to the end that at least that is already there. So she won't have to completely drop everything on them. We'll see.
Yeah, I think so. I think the other thing is like maybe some of them, maybe Keanu had a plan to impart some information to Rachel potentially, or let's try to
Mm-hmm.
have her be a conduit for him to go to the jury because it's his big sister, his frenemy.
Right.
But because of the way she got eliminated, I think that kind of it changed the impact of how they could like
Right.
navigate the jury stuff because of that whole swap.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. All right. Well, it is about time to wrap things up. So, what are your final thoughts about Keanu and Ava?
Wow. Well, we have probably one of the most two different players on each spectrum that we could have ever had go out, on an episode together like this for us. With Ava, I really had some high hopes for Ava going into it. I think it's unmet potential is for Ava, where she was very well socially. She could have some reads in the house, had allies, good positioning, can win a competition, but overall, she didn't do the most important thing. And we talk about it time and time again. And I say, oh, there's like a killer instinct in Big Brother, but there's a want to be on Big Brother. There's a need to be on Big Brother when you apply for it and you want to play the game. And that we didn't see that in Ava. We didn't see her take that action. And if she did, she would literally go from, this middle pack of the game with NA on all this to actually a really strong contender to win this game and be impressive. But she had no interest in doing that. And I think that really showed in the way she went out of the game. She didn't play the game and she defaulted out essentially. And with Keanu, what a fun person to watch. Truly one of the most entertaining players we've seen for a very long time, whether he was right, wrong, mostly wrong. It was fun to watch. Really broke every single rule that we have there. And I always say there's going to be a player that was an antithesis to all your rules and will somehow go far. Big Brother's making it easier because they're putting so many competitions in there. But for all those things, he played the game horribly wrong. I loved watching him, but he did go out because he didn't believe in David's rule. He believed in Keanu's rules.
Yeah, yeah. Well, a few weeks ago, Keanu said, "At this point, I think I'm the one who's bad at this game. Am I making horrible reads and people are just like, go F yourself? You don't know what you're talking about? At this point, it makes me feel like I'm the one who doesn't know what the F he's doing." And he was right. The only problem was he wasn't actually serious when he said it. It's too bad because if he had only listened to himself in that moment, he could have actually learned something. But learning something was not what Keanu did. He was as delusional about his reads and his place in the game on his last day as he was on his first day. Indeed, even after his time in the house, because when he walked out, he told Julie, "I shouldn't have to change to be a winner." Well, yes, actually, you do need to change to be a winner. Not just because you were terrible at the game, but because everyone needs to alter their behavior from how they act in normal, everyday situation. That's what these rules are all about, is how to modify your behavior to win the game. I mentioned earlier that Rachel was a prophet, as she told Keanu very early in the game. The whole house is against you. You are going to have to comp beast your way out of this or form some relationships that are real. He comp beasted for a while, but I'm not sure he ever formed any relationships that were real, except maybe with Rachel herself after multiple tries. But by then it was too late. She kept trying to teach Keanu how to play Big Brother. And he kept getting an F in her class, no matter how many times he retook it, while not understanding why she wasn't giving him an A plus. Over 2 months ago, Keanu was upset about, I think it was Jimmy. I think it was a situation you mentioned earlier. And he said, "Fool me twice, then I'm just an effing idiot." Indeed. But if that's the case, what does fooling him about 200 times make him? A really, really bad player. As for Ava, in our preview podcast, I ranked her as a 1 out of 10 for her likelihood of following my rules. And I was pretty darn close. She wasn't quite as bad as Kelly, but that's an incredibly low bar. As I said at the time, I did not see anything in her interview that indicated she had any real clue how to play the game. And in response to all the questions in her pregame interview, anything about strategy, she gave non answers. All we really knew was that she needed the money. And that about summed it up for her in the game. Even now, I still don't think she has any real clue how to play. If she does, she certainly didn't show it. Yes, she needs the money, and she wanted to win America's favorite player for that. But you know what? She isn't going to succeed there either. As much as Keanu played poorly, at least he tried. Sean Paul Thomas once wrote, "Better to have tried and failed than to have never tried at all." Keanu wanted to be there. He wanted to play the game hard. For all his faults, and there were plenty of them that we've discussed, apathy was certainly not among them. Even as constantly wrong as he was, I'd much rather see someone like that instead of someone just lying around most of the time with no interest in playing, which is why Keanu will probably win America's favorite and Ava most certainly won't. But that's not the game we're judging here. Keanu tried and failed over and over again because he never learned. Ava just failed because she never tried. And that is why Keanu and Ava lost.
How long have you been saving that clip?
I've been saving it since it happened. For
Oh,
those
that's
of you who
funny.
are on audio only, that was going all the way back to Keanu falling through the trap door. And so I do think it was appropriate that he left the way he did. You know, him being the dungeon master in the mastermind's lair, being stabbed, you know, with his voodoo doll being stabbed in this, as we could see on my background here, his candles and all of this. So I think it was appropriate for the way he left the game.
I think it was a very appropriate clip and a very good monologue, as
Thank
usual.
you.
Very good. Somebody who didn't have to try but succeeded is you, David, as you put together probably the most notes we've had on a player this season together in a very succinct way. So
Thank you.
kudos to
Thank
you.
you. So we will have our final predictions in a moment after a few other pieces of information. Of course, one of those important pieces of information is that we will be back one more time for why blank won. Probably Morgan. I gave away my prediction.
Whoa, hold up.
Yeah, but so we will be back. We haven't finalized it in our calendars yet, but probably look for it around late Tuesday night, early Wednesday. Um, in the meantime, if you want our full thoughts, we are all over social media where we discuss Big Brother and other topics.
Yes, don't forget we are active on a number of different social media platforms where we discuss Big Brother and other topics. On Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram, I'm at Kabir, and on TikTok, I'm at Basmati Boy. But David is truly all over the place, but you can track him down in a few different ways. You can find his various accounts through his Linktree at Linktree/David Bloomberg, but you can find him directly on Blue Sky as at David Bloomberg, where he gets in a lot of fights and feuds with people on there. So jump in, please.
Come on, I don't get into that many fights with people.
No,
more of the fights take place in my TikTok comments. Yeah. But yes, I encourage everyone to come over to Blue Sky because there are less fights there. This is a much friendlier group than that other X social media platform. And as Survivor starts, any Survivor fan should come over there as well. I am at David Bloomberg TV or at David Bloomberg there. And as I mentioned on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, I am at David Bloomberg TV, where I have been posting usually around 3, sometimes more videos with my thoughts and clips, mostly about Big Brother 27. That will continue as we transition into Survivor 49. And there were some on the Traders Ireland as well. Speaking of Survivor 49, the first podcast of the Why Blank Lost 10th anniversary season with Jessica Lewis is posted, as we also welcomed special guest Chappelle, who guest hosted for you while you were off getting married. And if people haven't already, you should be sure to check out the special Why Blank Lost 10th anniversary podcast with me, Jessica, and Rob from about a week ago. It is filled with fun stuff and information about how the podcast started, behind the scenes stories, and even what Jessica thought as she covered her one season of Big Brother before she ran away screaming. In addition, I hosted the Tradar podcast for the final 3 episodes of the Traders Ireland. So you could check that out wherever you get podcasts or on YouTube. And that's, again, the Tradar, TRAIDAR. So, again, most importantly, we will be back in, not too long for the Why Blank One podcast. But first, we need to do our predictions, and I accidentally gave mine away because, as always, we write these up before any part of the HOH comp. And it just seems pretty clear to me what will happen. Morgan will win. Vince will come in second. And if Vince should happen to win the final HOH comp, there's no way he cuts Morgan. I know he should, but there's no way. And then it just seems very unlikely that Ashley will suddenly win. She's won one thing at the very beginning of the season. Even if she does win, she has to win 2 parts to move forward. I just don't see it happening. If by some miracle it does, I think she will cut Morgan and take her shot at Vince. And just as we talked about earlier, she might have a chance against him because so many people would be voting against Vince. But like I said, my prediction is for Morgan to be our Big Brother 27 champion.
On day 0, I picked one person. And I'm sticking to them. All right. I'm sticking to them. I think Morgan actually wins the HOH competition, but I do think she cuts Vince. We have Ashley go, and I know this is crazy. I know it's crazy.
I think that's more crazy than Ashley winning HOH, honestly.
I think Ashley beats her. I'm going to put it out there. You know what? I'm going to stick by her. Week in and week out, I've been like, all right, this is the week she goes out. I haven't believed week in and week out, but I'm sticking to her. This is the last time she's there. You know what? And I'm going to improve my win record. All right. I'm going to add another one to the tally. All right. So that's my prediction.
All right.
Now, as we wrap up, I want to encourage people to check out the RHAP Patreon program at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Rob has several patron-only podcasts for Big Brother, plus other perks like the Facebook group and Discord. You can help support shows like ours and everything on the network by becoming a patron at robhasawebsite.com/patron.
And make sure you're subscribed to all of the RHAP podcasts by going to our to We Know Big. Well, I'd say go to WeKnowBigBrother.com, but really we're moving out of Big Brother. You should subscribe there too, but you can also get everything at WeKnowRealityTV.com, and that'll keep you going into the Survivor season as well. So definitely, if you don't subscribe already, do that. Subscribe to RHAP on YouTube as well.
And finally, we want to thank Scott St. Pierre and Jessica Sterling and the whole RHAP reality TV wrap-ups behind the scenes team for all the work they do for editing and posting everything else. We really appreciate everything you do to get our voices from our microphones to your ears. And thank you for everyone for tuning in this entire season. We're almost there. The finish line is coming very shortly. Let us know your thoughts. I mean, this was a long episode, but we want to hear it. Tell us about your thoughts on Ava, thoughts on Keanu, and things that we think maybe, we couldn't cover everything. So let us know something that you had in mind that we didn't cover. So we want to hear it all.
Yes. Thank you, Ovi, for a great episode as we had to fit it in here among everything else that was going on for both of us and for reality TV in general. And the two of us will see everyone in just a few days, and you can see us on social media in the meantime. So bye, everyone.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.